Have you ever wondered why positive thinking doesn't seem to change your life, no matter how hard you try? You've repeated affirmations, visualized success, and tried to stay optimistic, yet somehow, you still feel stuck. If that sounds familiar, the problem isn't that you're not positive enough. The real issue is much deeper. Most people believe thoughts create reality. But what if thoughts are only the surface? What if your life is shaped by something much more powerful, your internal state? Here's the truth. Most manifestation advice never explains. The quantum field doesn't respond to temporary thoughts. It responds to coherence. That means your thoughts, emotions, nervous system, and identity must all work together. If one part of you is saying, everything is fine, while another part is filled with stress, fear, or constant pressure, your signal becomes fragmented, and fragmented signals don't create new realities. Imagine trying to tune a radio station. Turning the volume up won't change the station. You have to adjust the frequency. In the same way, repeating positive thoughts cannot change your life if your internal frequency remains the same. This is why forced positivity often feels exhausting. You're trying to convince your mind while your body is still expecting struggle. Neuroscience supports this idea. When your nervous system feels unsafe or constantly stressed, your brain automatically focuses on survival. It predicts delay, effort, and disappointment, because that's what has become familiar. Even if you think positive thoughts, your brain continues operating from its old blueprint. That's why so many people experience the same patterns year after year. It's not because they're failing, it's because their internal state hasn't changed. The good news is this: you don't need better affirmations. You need a more coherent internal environment. Real transformation begins when your body no longer argues with the future you want. Instead of forcing yourself to feel excited every day, start paying attention to something far more important. How tense are you? How rushed do you feel? How often are you trying to control every outcome? These hidden patterns shape your reality far more than any positive quote ever could. Once your nervous system begins to relax, something remarkable happens. Your thoughts naturally become more positive. You stop forcing optimism because peace becomes your new baseline, and that's when your external world begins to change, not because you tried harder, but because your inner signal finally became clear. So, if positive thinking isn't the secret, what actually changes your reality? The answer is surprisingly simple. The quantum field responds to the state you return to most often, not the thoughts you briefly create, but the identity you consistently live from. Your brain works the same way. It constantly predicts the future based on what feels familiar. If stress, struggle, and uncertainty have become your normal, your mind will keep looking for evidence to support those expectations. That's why changing your life isn't about thinking differently for a few minutes each day. It's about changing what feels normal. This is where most people get stuck. They chase motivation, excitement, and emotional highs, believing those feelings mean they're aligned. But those emotions don't last. And when they disappear, so does their confidence. Real alignment feels very different. It feels calm. It feels stable. It feels like you no longer need to convince yourself that something good is coming, because deep inside, you already trust the process. From a quantum perspective, this is called coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and nervous system stop pulling in different directions, your signal becomes clear, and clear signals create clear results. This is also why manifestation often seems to happen the moment people stop obsessing over it. It's not because they gave up. It's because they stopped creating resistance. Think about the times in your life when something amazing happened unexpectedly. You probably weren't desperately chasing it. You were simply living your life, relaxed and open. That relaxed state wasn't accidental. It was alignment. And neuroscience explains this beautifully. When your nervous system leaves survival mode, your brain stops scanning for problems, starts noticing opportunities. Your decisions become clearer. Your timing improves. You respond instead of reacting. The opportunities were always there, but now you're finally able to see them. Spiritually, this is what surrender truly means. It doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. It means letting go of the constant pressure to control every detail. There's a hug difference between having intention and carrying tension. Intention gives direction. Tension creates resistance. The more you grip your future, the harder it becomes to experience it. But when you relax into the present moment, your actions become more natural, your choices become wiser, and life begins flowing, instead of feeling like a constant battle. That's why the goal isn't to force yourself into a high vibration. The goal is to create a stable inner environment where peace becomes normal. Because when peace becomes your baseline, clarity follows. And when clarity replaces fear, reality begins responding in ways that no amount. At some point, something quietly begins to change. You stop questioning whether you're doing everything right. You stop checking your thoughts every few minutes. You stop wondering if you're aligned enough. And that's the moment everything starts falling into place. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've stopped interfering with your own progress. The quantum field doesn't need constant reminders. It doesn't need endless affirmations or emotional highs. It responds to consistency. When your inner world becomes calm, your outer world naturally begins to reorganize considios. This is why the biggest transformations rarely feel dramatic. Most people expect a life-changing moment filled with excitement, but real change usually arrives quietly. A conversation opens an unexpected opportunity. A decision suddenly feels obvious. The right people appear at the right time. Nothing feels forced. Everything simply fits. From a neuroscience perspective, this makes perfect sense. When your nervous system leaves survival mode, your brain becomes more aware, creative, and adaptable. Instead of reacting from fear, you begin responding with clarity. You notice possibilities that were always there, but hidden beneath stress and overthinking. Spiritually, this is what true alignment feels like. You aren't trying to control life anymore. You're working with it. You're no longer chasing every opportunity. You're recognizing the ones that genuinely belong to you. This is why ease should never be mistaken for laziness. Ease doesn't mean you're doing less. It means you're wasting less energy fighting yourself. The strongest people aren't always the busiest. They're the ones whose actions come from clarity instead of pressure. And that's exactly where lasting transformation begins. So if you've been feeling calmer lately, if you're no longer desperate for immediate answers, if you're starting to trust your own timing, don't mistake that for losing your ambition. It may be the clearest sign that you're finally becoming aligned. Remember this: your reality doesn't change because you force it. It changes because you become the kind of person who can naturally live inside that new reality. The future you're hoping for isn't waiting for you to think more positively. It's waiting for you to become more coherent. When your thoughts, emotions, actions, and identity all point in the same direction, life no longer feels like an uphill battle. It begins to flow. So stop trying to fix every thought. Stop chasing the perfect mindset. Stop believing that success requires constant struggle. Instead, create inner stability. Choose presence over pressure. Choose clarity over control. Choose trust over fear. Because the life you've been asking for doesn't need more effort from you. It needs less interference. And perhaps that's the greatest realization of all. You were never lacking potential. You were only carrying too much internal resistance. The moment that resistance fades, your natural direction becomes clear. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because you finally did. And once your inner world becomes coherent, reality has no choice but to respond. Of forced positivity ever could.